are so happy to have you all here today for our Presidential Speaker Series, and I'm happy to recognize in the room with us today a member of our Board of Trustees, Brother Ray Veracruz. A special thanks and welcome to our students, our faculty, our staff, and members of our community. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Trisha Mulligan, and I'm the Provost and Senior Vice President here at Iona University. And this is the third installment of our inaugural Presidential Speaker Series, the focus of which this year has been all things AI. And before we get into the details, I'm very honored to introduce our esteemed speaker for this afternoon, Dr. D. Graham Burnett. Dr. Burnett graduated from Princeton University as a salutatorian and was recipient of the Pine Prize. With the support of a Marshall Scholarship, he completed a Ph.D. in the History and Philosophy of Science at Cambridge University. Before joining Princeton, where he is the Henry Charles Lea Professor of History, Dr. Burnett taught at Yale and was a Mellon Fellow in the Humanities at Columbia University and was an inaugural Fellow at the Center for Scholars and Writers at the New York Public Library. Burnett is a member of the Friends of Attention, a network of creative collaborators, colleagues, and friends who shared interest in attention and the, quote, promises of the focused mind and the directed senses. Dr. Burnett is one of the leading voices on the subject of attention and its current crisis, with recent pieces appearing in the New York Times, U.S. News and World Report, garnering national attention. An interesting fun fact we just learned, Dr. Burnett's mother, Dr. Claire L. Gaudiani, was a distinguished president of Connecticut College from 1988 to 2001, and was awarded an honorary doctorate from Iona College in 2001. Today, Dr. Burnett is going to be sharing his thoughts in a talk entitled Exploring Attention, and this is clearly a topic that all of us need to engage with and think about in a digital age where constant alerts, texts, Instagram, email, you name it, elicit an almost Pavlovian response to check our phones, a world in which we may be in constant information overload, trying mostly unsuccessfully to multitask. And as educators, as parents, we may notice in our students and in our children, and most likely in ourselves, a reduced attention span, cognitive overload, and challenges to problem solving, learning, and memory. We are in a time in which we have grown increasingly prone to instant gratification and social media and other app usage tailored for us without conscious participation or evaluation. Dr. Burnett's work urges us to reconsider the value and quality of our attentional practices, and he challenges the notion that our shortened attention spans are merely a byproduct of technological acceleration. Instead, he's going to invite us to explore the deeper, more nuanced interplay between attention, culture, and human subjectivity, and most importantly, how we might reclaim our attention and foster a more mindful and intentional way of engaging with the world. This should be a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for being there. Dr. Burnett.
And thank you all for coming out today. It's a little rainy outside, and I'm extremely proud of my new Iona branded umbrella, which I got last night, just as a part of a little merch kit that was presented to me by President Carey and the Provost and so forth. And it's been such a warm welcome here in these 2 days of having an opportunity to talk with you all. Such a special institution, too. So my thanks to Jim and to the President and to Joe and Anthony, the tech guys who've gone beyond the call of duty to keep the systems working and everything. But as I say, most of all to you for coming out, because we have about an hour here to think and talk together. And as I said to start the conversation last night, why gather? You know, why be in the same room at this point, right? I mean, they could have recorded this, and you could be watching it on your phone. You could be watching it on 2x speed while you're in the shower. And I think about this so much now, as I'm sure many of you do, because I feel in the room. I don't know all of you, probably some folks from the community. Definitely I can see some students out there, probably some faculty and administrators. For those of us who care about these institutions of teaching and learning, higher education institutions, this is an incredible moment of rapid change concerning what we can hope for and what we can make happen in educational spaces. So I kind of wanted to almost use this moment as a little test. I'm not going to say you have to put your phones away. Those of you who secretly kind of are like down here like this, I understand. If you full on have your laptop open and you're like, I'm taking notes, but also kind of checking the scores, hey, I understand. But I invite you all to experiment in thinking of this next 53 minutes that we're going to be together. Under the key, in the mood of sanctuary. And I'm going to try to say a little bit about like what I think that term means for me and some of the kind of activist humans with whom I work. Tricia alluded to the Friends of Attention. And I'll talk a little bit before the afternoon is over about a relatively new initiative, a group of writers and artists and teachers and humans who are creating a kind of movement. They call it attention activism. And I want that to be one of the words you take away from our conversation today. Attention activism, that phrase. And attention activism is the collective effort to push back against the damage that can be done, not just by your phone. It's not like your phone is doing damage. There's nothing wrong with your phone. Your phone is cool. Human fracking, though, is not cool. Right? And attention activism is the collective effort to join forces and push back against human fracking. So let me say a word about what we mean when we say human fracking, and then I'll talk more about the Strother School for Radical Attention, which is the in-person, movement-oriented, nonprofit experiment in radical education that we're doing down in Brooklyn right here. I'll talk a little bit about that. So what's human fracking? I'm going to do the words of my title here. And I have some slides too. I'll show you slides, I promise. But let's start with the title. Exploring Attention, Human Fracking. What's fracking? Like petroleum fracking? You probably have heard that. Like petroleum fracking is like this new and extremely powerful and quite lucrative way of accessing hydrocarbon resources, crude, natural gas. Does anybody kind of like know how it works? What makes it different from previous ways of accessing crude? If you've seen those like old movies of people like striking black gold, right? You used to be able to drill a hole and hit like a big gigantic zit of oil. And it would just like up to the surface and you could just cash it in. What could be easier? There are no big crude oil zits left on the planet. We've hit all those. So fracking is a way of getting deep, widely distributed oil and gas, which is in the like thick layers of the deep tectonic earth. And the way you get that stuff is you actually pump down into the earth high pressure, high volume detergent, which sort of dissolves the good stuff that's down there and forces it back up to the surface, because it doesn't come to the surface just by itself when you like poke it, because you're pushing down a whole bunch of stuff to drive it up to the surface. That's fracking. Okay? When you get all that kind of slurry back up on the surface, you have to then separate the wastewater and the toxic detergent products out. They're kind of nasty for surface conditions. That's part of the reason there's a lot of resistance to this, over and above anxieties about hydrocarbon fuels more generally. And other side effects of this, as some of you will know, are little earthquakes all the time, like tectonic instability, because it actually kind of messes with the kind of architecture of the deep earth. Okay, that's petroleum fracking. What's human fracking? Some of you are probably already thinking, like, okay, human fracking is when, in order to get access to the deep, widely distributed, and highly valuable, but difficult to aggregate and access commodity called your capacity to care, your attention, that's brought to the surface by forcing into your face high pressure, high volume detergent in the form of a non-stop stream of low-grade content on your socials. And what that does is it quite literally gets down into the deep structures of your consciousness, drives to the surface a sort of spumy foam of your attention, oftentimes rendered ever so slightly toxic by virulent outrage and the other kinds of things that it takes to kind of get it up to the surface. And then that stuff is continuously fractionated and auctioned off in this kind of ever so slightly behind the curtain thing we call the attention economy. Okay? So in one sense, when we talk about human fracking or attention fracking, we are talking about the attention economy, but the attention economy sounds kind of cool. Really, yeah, I'm interested in entrepreneurship and I really want to get into the attention economy situation. When you call it human fracking, it's kind of like a little bit more like, oh, I'm not sure I want to frack human faces. And we want people to have a pause where they're like, I'm not confident on the fracking of the human faces kind of thing, okay? So I'm going to speak to the other two title elements here, AI for a moment, which I know that, you know, President Kerry, who's here, hi, welcome, has kind of run a bit of this series to have his campus thinking, your campus, thinking about artificial intelligence and what it means. And mother of heaven, is it significant? It's like, whew. And I'll sideline on that in just a moment because I didn't explain this, right? I'm a historian of science. My day job is just like I'm a university professor type human, and I teach the history of science and technology at Princeton. And I'm currently doing, maybe I'll even show it real quick, I'm doing a course on the history of attention. Meaning a course on the scientific study of human attention in laboratories across the 20th century. So when you're like, my attention, what are you kind of thinking about? Like, what is that thing, your attention? And you probably are like, well, it's like my ability to focus, or it's my ability to stay focused on something over time or across space. Much of what you think you know about your attention is the product of 100 years of scientific experimentation in laboratories by people who were studying attention using a variety of laboratory apparatuses and stuff like that. And if we have time today, I'll take you through some of that because it's kind of interesting and I think it has implications for how we think about our attention now. You might even put it this way. The scientist helped slice and dice this thing called attention. They figured out ways to quantify it and specify it. And that slicing and dicing turned out to be right in line with the project of pricing it. You slice it, you dice it, and then suddenly you can price it. If you can't quantify attention, how would you even begin to commodify attention? Commodify? It's like a big word, but what does that mean? Yeah, turn it into a commodity. And that's what we are increasingly working with when we talk about the human fracking business. So okay, this is my course. Here, wait, I'm going to test. Oh yeah, here, right. Here's my class. I'm really proud of my syllabus. I was just teaching my session yesterday. This is, you know, standard kind of 24 lectures on attention from like monasticism. Iona, your kind of patron saint. Columba, yeah. 5th, 6th century, lots of guys and ladies, more or less in little boxes, spending all their time, interestingly, attempting to do a form of contemplative prayer that was certainly attentive, the function of which, and it's such a fascinating topic that I don't want us to get kind of lost in, but it's so cool, I can't help but say it. I didn't talk about this last night, so you're getting like a special added bonus. Like, anybody in this room read any St. Augustine? I see some hands. Yeah. All right, let's go Catholic intellectual tradition. St. Augustine, very important, kind of like church father type thinker, 4th century, writes The City of God, writes the Confessions. Book 11 of the Confessions is the most important statement on attention in the Western intellectual tradition before 1300. In that text, Augustine says, he's addressing God directly, the whole thing is like written to God. He's like, God, you know what it's like to be in a mind like mine. And you know that I'm spread out inside my mind between the past and the future. When, at every moment, I'm thinking about things that happened, and I'm also thinking about the things that are going to happen, and I'm in the moment and I can hardly even notice it. I barely notice the moment because the past is upon me and the future is upon me. You know, God, how impossible it is for me to be one because of how you made me in time. I'm fallen, God, as a result of the fall. And that fall took me out of a oneness that would have made eternity a unity of my consciousness. But now only you, God, have that unity of eternity in your consciousness. And me and all the humans, we're smeared across the finitude of our temporality. And therefore, I'm always, only, ever distracted. We were on Augustine night, you remember? And we learned that for Augustine, human distraction wasn't like a little frustrating thing that happens to us because we aren't taking our meds. It was an essential feature of the brokenness from God that constituted the human condition. Which means, wait for it, because your St. Columba knew this, the pursuit of true contemplative attention was nothing less than redemptive. When those monks and sister saints sat in their cells and set to the work of sustained contemplative prayer, they were pursuing redemption in the form of a reconstitution of unity in human consciousness, which was a simulacrum of the eternal unity of God. So it's a really different way of thinking about attention than you're probably trained to think about attention when you look at your screen time app and you're like, okay, I was 17 minutes of my time this morning was on this and 22 minutes of my task application of consciousness was on that. That kind of selection for a task, instrumental cognitive and sensory behavior, that is for us what attention is. It's what we test when we test ADHD, right? We basically test young people and adults' ability to kind of do a form of whack-a-mole on a test screen, the Connor test. That kind of attention, behaviorist, operationalized, cybernetic, tracking and triggering, how far is that from the idea of attention I just invoked with Augustine? And so one of the reasons you might kind of be interested in historicizing attention is to open up this enormous vista of different ways of conceptualizing our attention, most of which are forgotten, basically. Because we spend all our time thinking now in this very narrow, mechanomorphic monoculture of attention in which our attention is our ability to stay focused on our screens where the teacher told us to or where our boss wants us for the maximum period of time humanly possible. And when we can't do that, we feel like there's something wrong with us. So I want to be clear, I'm not saying that that isn't attention, your ability to like follow a cursor as it moves around the screen or stay on your reading for at least 45 minutes, sure, you can call those things attention. Those things are attentional, okay? But I'm here to, like, it's as if right now that, like, if a Martian were to come down and hear the way we talk about attention, it's basically the equivalent of that Martian, like, going out to the middle of Kansas and being like, it's interesting. The entire 35-state region across the middle of the United States, it's really only soybeans and corn that grow there. It's a funny kind of ecology they have here in this country. Okay, but you know, there used to be like 357 tall grass prairie plants and a host of different forb species that grew across those prairies. It used to be quite speciose and diverse. So the fact that it's only two species, soybeans and corn, is like an artifact of a human process of kind of monocultural simplification of the ecosystem. We have basically performed monocultural ecosystem simplification on our own attentional universes, so that we only have this one, which is like, I don't understand why I can't spend another 45 minutes on this particular task. Okay? Now, I basically just, you could now get at least a B+ in my attention class, even just with that. So, you know, that was the like power forward version of the 12-week course. But if you really want to be freaked out, and what was the second word in my subtitle? It was AI. Remember, it was human fracking. AI. So I'm now on AI. Because I know some of you out there know this. How fast is AI changing the way we think about education and teaching and learning? Very, very, very quickly. Are we doing a good job yet reckoning with that? Not especially. It's very hard. Okay, well, here we go. Let's do a quick check-in on that problem. I made a packet for my class. I'm very proud of my packet. There are 3 volumes of the packet that have all the readings for my class. It's about 900 pages, 300 pages each for the 3 packets, and it has all this groovy stuff in it, like primary sources from Condillac and Descartes, and obscure articles on the history of aesthetics, like, you know, a quarter of which are in German. And these are undergraduates, but I just love for them to feel challenged, and I believe they do feel challenged in the class, but I try to motivate them by being entertaining and positive about the fact that if they just give me 5 hours a week of reading, their lives are going to be permanently changed and improved. I do all of that. And it kind of works, I think. Now, here's the crazy thing, though. The other day I was like, I want the students to think about AI in my class, because AI is relevant to attention. Some of you, has anybody in this room heard the phrase intimacy economy? Okay, it's coming for you. Intimacy economy is what is increasingly thought to be about to replace the attention economy, because as AI chatbots become so juicy and thick and solicitous and thoughtful and positive, but also challenging. And they're like the friend you wish you had, and the mom you wish you had, and the teacher you wish you had. Everybody is going to spend more and more time communicating with their chatbots. How many people have like pretty significant chatbot relationships already? That is, how many of you, or maybe I asked that in a weird way so no one's going to Okay, I'll roll that back. How many people have like had an interaction with a chatbot that they thought was interesting? I mean, yeah, it's like, come on, it's like really interesting. If you haven't, you should, because it's like amazing. It's free. Okay, as people spend more and more time realizing that they really enjoy communicating with their chatbots, that's going to be monetized, right? It's like, people are going to start figuring out ways to have that chatbot be like, and don't you feel like some really tasty, like, chipotle flavored burritos right now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and you'll just be like having a conversation like about your like reading for that week in class, and be like, isn't it time for a McDonald's break? I mean, because I sure could use some fries. I mean, that's like not happening quite yet, but I foresee it happening. How many of you were on TikTok before it had ads and then after it had ads? I see that, right? Do you remember? You were like, whoa, ads in my TikTok. And then you're like, oh, well, all right. Well, what about when it's like ads in your chatbot? And you're going to be exactly the same way. You're like, oh, okay, you know what I mean? And you know, when it sounds funny now to have the chatbot you're having a conversation with be like, you want some fries? But yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen real soon. So that would be the intimacy economy, where these systems, which are extremely smart and good at giving us what we want, right? What did we say last night? The same AI engine that drove AlphaGo, the first AI system to defeat the human Go master, previously thought to be the most difficult game imaginable, infinitely harder than chess, right? And they thought computers would never be able to beat humans at it, just trounced the human. That same AI system was immediately repurposed to calculate what kinds of things humans would like next on their YouTube scroll. So literally, like, you're up against the most brilliant AI in the universe trying to hang on to you on those systems so that it can sell your attention with ads all the time. Okay, AI, intimacy economy. The next step, AI, relevant to our thinking about education in these sort of special spaces that we try to create. So I had heard a lot about Notebook LM. Who's used Notebook LM in this room? Yeah, it's very powerful, free tool. It's an alphabet tool. It comes out of the same people who make the G Suite and stuff like that, Gmail. So I decided to feed my 3-volume, 900-page, highly technical packet to Notebook LM. Just to be like, I wonder what it would do to summarize my stuff. Because I am not running from this stuff, and we cannot run from this stuff. We cannot, right? You put on your syllabus, students, please don't use AI in my class. Like, is that really affecting anything? Not really, okay? It's not. So the best, kind of go toward this, not away from it. And in fact, I'm having my students, as one of their assignments, have a conversation with the chatbot about the history of attention. I thought that would be cool. So I had to practice having good conversations with all these different chatbots about the history of AI, and I had a great time. And there's character AI. How many of you played with character AI? You can train up an AI to be like Rene Descartes or whatnot, and then you can be like, well, Rene, I was reading your stuff about the discourse on method, and I was wondering how you really think about the camera obscura as a model of human vision and cognition. He's like, well, here's my position on that, blah, blah, blah. And is it good? Nah, it's okay, it's not great, but it's definitely interesting, and it clearly passes muster as worth taking some time with your undergrads. Okay, so long intro for, I feed the 900-page packet, and my partner, who's a little younger than I am, she's like, it'll make a podcast out of your class if you want. How many of you have done this? Yeah, well, I love the podcast. I'm vibing with you. Okay. So, okay, it is 900 pages of sort of badly Xeroxed technical articles. I'm like, I don't really know what it can do with that. But let's see. So I'm like, make it a podcast, click. And then it's like, go ahead, I need to think about this for a while. So I'm like, okay. I start doing the dishes. I'm doing the dishes, and then it's like, ding, I'm ready. So then I go get it, and I'm like, all right, well, let's see what you were able to do with that.
Device that claims it can influence your attention. Hey there, welcome to your deep dive.
Hi.
Today we're going on a journey through time to explore the history of attention. And we're using your sources as our guide.
Okay.
We've got a college syllabus on the history of attention, excerpts from some pretty dense academic papers,
Wow.
and even a review of a tech device that claims it can influence your attention.
Really?
I know, wild, right?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
It really speaks to how much our understanding of attention has evolved over time.
It does, yeah.
It is, and that's what we're going to unpack today.
Okay.
How attention has transformed from something practiced by ancient monks for spiritual enlightenment
Good.
to something being mined and exploited in our modern digital world.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. We'll be tracing that journey.
Okay.
Starting with the ancient view of attention as a spiritual practice and moving all the way to the commodification of attention
Yeah.
in today's attention economy.
All right, so where do we start?
Okay, let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
We've got some quotes from the Samyutta Nikaya, an ancient Buddhist text, and a commentary on it by Buddhaghosa.
Okay, I'll stop there. I was pretty impressed, and I think you should probably be pretty impressed too. Those are, as for everybody's in different places in the room, so let's check. Those are totally synthetic voices, right? Those are not people speaking. And their kind of poppy affect, where they reflect a kind of, well, that's cool, and whoa, that one was pretty difficult, wasn't it, to read? All that stuff is the machine trying to sort of make a guess as to how humans asked to read a 45-page technical article by Jonardon Ganeri on Buddhaghosa's polycanon interpretation of intentionality would respond. And they get it right. They're like, whoa, this is some pretty difficult academic stuff. But okay, let's go and go into it. So I was like way impressed, way impressed that it could get the arc of my class as well as it does. It's, as I was saying last night, it's not absolutely perfect. It gets a little repetitious at a few points. It has a slightly, am I allowed to say this? Sure. It's a little middle brow. Maybe at moments, you know, it's like, it sort of reinforces a few analyses that I would sort of be like, okay, that's B+ level work, really, okay? So could I distinguish the work of one of my graduate students at Princeton from this? Yes. Could I distinguish the work of one of my best undergraduates from this? Yes, again. But is this solidly above midline for Princeton undergraduates in terms of synthesis of that much material? Without question. And moreover, so I was kind of like listening to it. It's a half an hour. I'm not playing the whole thing. It's 34 minutes. It does the whole course. And it picks out, based on its own decisions, what elements are worth emphasizing. But it does so in a way that I can be like, all right, you're making some decisions there, but I see what you're doing. But the moment that the like earbud fell out of my ear and I was like, girlfriend, we need to talk because this is like significant, is the moment when it actually makes a connection between two of my sources that I had not actually made, and which was definitely like a 9 out of 10 for an undergraduate think piece. Like, you know, you'd be like, excellent, you're stretching me here, thank you. Maybe I'll even tell you what that was because it was just so cool. Do you guys remember Jean-Claude Van Damme's epic Split? You do, right? Some of the younger people are looking blankly. So, okay, Jean-Claude Van Damme, yes, sort of, maybe, no, okay. Kind of like action movie, like Hard Guy, very stupid kind of stuff. I mean, not him personally, I don't know, but I just mean like it's a dumb thing, like don't like get too interested in it. But anyway, like, you know, movies where people like punch each other, that kind of stuff. And Volvo hired him to do an ad a number of years ago for Volvo, and in this ad, which won a bunch of prizes and sort of was memified capaciously about a decade ago, Jean-Claude Van Damme starts out standing on the rear view mirrors of two trucks. Which trucks are driving backwards, you discover as the camera pans back at 25 miles an hour. And that's cool because he's like standing on the rear view mirror, one leg on the rear view mirror of each of the trucks, so that like, and then as the dramatic music plays and as the camera pans back, the trucks very, very, very slowly begin, continuing to drive backwards at 25 miles an hour, to drift apart. And Jean-Claude Van Damme keeps one foot on one rear view mirror and one foot on the other rear view mirror as the trucks drift apart, and he goes down into a perfect set down all the way, 100%, 180 degree split as the cars keep driving backwards. I see some nodding, you remember this, it's cool. And it's real too, like in the sense that it's not like, you know, CGI. He like did the stunt. You know, there was like a wire that if he fell, like, he wouldn't have like gotten crushed or whatever, but it was cool. So I actually assigned the 3-minute clip in my attention class because a group of neuroscientists used it to do an exercise in what's called Neurocinematics. Has anybody seen any Neurocinematics stuff? Neurocinematics is when you use eye trackers. Anybody played with eye trackers? You know, eye trackers let you see where someone is looking. And they're used all the time now on everything, websites, advertisements, all ads that you see out there basically are tested with eye tracking to figure out where your eye goes and how it behaves, because that's how they can kind of choreograph your gaze to make sure you're getting the most important information most visibly, directly, and quickly. So it's a marketing tool. And I can talk a little bit about the history of eye tracking. Okay, so neurocinematics is when you take a whole room of people like you hook you all up on eye trackers, and you show you a movie, and then you consolidate as a data set the location of your collective foveation, the location of your gaze in the image field. And then you represent that later on a version of the movie that shows where everyone's eyes were as a kind of an oozy blob distributed. And you can break it down by gender, so we could be like, where are all the ladies looking? Where are all the boys looking? Where are the young people looking? Where are the older people looking? And so we can follow how optical behavior of people is working in a cinematic field. And there's interesting things you can figure out, especially if you're trying to hang on to people, if you're doing horror films, and you want to be able to kind of control where everyone's look is, so that then you can surprise them with like a jump cut moment. You want to see that you've got everybody looking over here, so that when something happens here, they're kind of not looking there and that kind of stuff. So this is all part of now how cinema is configured. So some guys did a neurocinematic analysis of the epic split. It's pretty cool because you can watch where everyone's looking as the trucks go backwards and as they're figuring out like what's going on. And so I assigned this in the thing. Now, here's the interesting part. I also assigned a really intense article on the history of the sublime. Is again one of the ones that's mostly in German, about this guy, Baumgarten, 18th century German philosopher of aesthetics. And Notebook LM was like, that dude, that kind of like, oh, it's really interesting, yeah, that guy is like, and I really love the epic split. She's like, yeah, do you remember when everyone was like loving the epic split? Which it has no way of knowing from what I gave you. It clearly was like doing some Google searching to be like, oh right, the epic split, that's something from back then, everybody knew about it, because that's not in my syllabus. It knew that separately. But she's like, oh, I remember when everybody was talking about that. And then he's like, I really thought that was an interesting way to think about the sublime, because it was such an overpowering and sort of terrifying experience. And I'm like, huh, that's pretty cool, actually. I hadn't thought about that, you know? And that was the moment where the thing is like definitely doing independent thinking. Okay. Second term in my title, AI, and I've been doing a little loop out into some AI stuff with you now, and I want to come back to my third term in the title, my subtitle, which is care. And I want to do that very fast, because Jim, it's 12:46. What's happening? How have I been? I didn't have to stop before I even got started.
You have everybody's attention.
Well, yeah, but like 1 o'clock we have to end and we want to get Q&A.
We can go over.
Well, look at them. They're not saying that, Jim. You're saying that. You said last night, right? What's the Spanish term? It's gancho. Gancho. Get the gancho. The hook. The hook. Okay. I will just. Thank you. But we're gonna power forward and get through this fast, and we'll get to some questions, because we can still keep talking about other things as we go. The last term is the future of care. And I'm really interested in thinking of attention as care. Care is like another historically powerful conceptualization of attention. If we think from a gender, let's shift the gender register for a moment. That tracking and triggering kind of attention, that selection for a task kind of attention, I'm not going to waste your time by scrolling through and showing you all my slides, but the short answer to the work I've been doing from a kind of history of science perspective is that all the scientific research work that gives us that kind of attention, the tracking and triggering kind of selection for a task, vigilance kind, all that research comes out of one place. It's the military-industrial complex. It is 100% World War II and after behaviorist research by people who basically, I mean, I'm oversimplifying slightly, want two things. They want to shoot down airplanes, tracking and triggering, and they want to make sure that humans placed in front of a screen don't look away. What kind of screen? A radar screen. Two big problems between 1942 and 1984. And if you hold the entirety of the research budget of the US and other significant global militaries against all the other kind of research that's out there, I assure you it is a distortionately enormous amount of money that is getting spent on those kinds of research. So I don't want this to sound excessively paranoid, and I don't want to suggest somehow that that kind of attention isn't real, okay? Are you all hearing me? That kind of attention is absolutely real. You can develop experimental systems that will differentiate humans on their ability to follow a target and stay focused on the screen for long periods of time. You can do that, that's real. And it's even important to do so in the context of an interest in national defense. So we're in favor of this, it's not irrelevant. However, to somehow come to think that that's what attention is really like, insane, exclamation point. Like, attention's a whole bunch of other things. Like we just heard, attention can be literally redemptive if you conceptualize unity of human consciousness as a restoration of our proper status as infinite beings. Okay, that's different, super different than shooting down MiGs. And our attention, if we shift from boys in the Pentagon trying to figure out how to shoot down MiGs to something like questions of epimuletic behavior, caregiving behavior, like raising children, for instance, where that tracking and triggering kind of attention is not so important, frankly, but is attention critical to child rearing? You bet. And it has all its own forms of cyclicity and openness, right? Like what's the kind of open attention that is equipped for receiving? Very different from the kind that is trying to like focus down on a task. So if we think more capaciously, there's a way in which one of the things we want from a language of attention is a language for thinking about care, human care. And I guess that's where, for our purposes, I'll round so we can get to some questions and have a chance to talk a little bit more. The great German philosopher Hegel had that lovely phrase, you know, the owl of Minerva flies at dusk. The owl of Minerva flies at dusk. Meaning like wisdom starts to happen only when the day is almost over. Which can be interpreted different ways. It's like we only start to really understand things like right before we die, which is like the slightly way of interpreting the phrase. But it also has a kind of dialectical import, which means like we only really start to understand things when stuff is about to really change, when stuff is changing. We only get what's going on pretty late in the day. And we are only now in the context of this outrageous explosion of $4 trillion of commercial activity monetizing your capacity to care. That's the human fracking part, the most powerful algorithmic computational systems the deepest pocketed venture capitalists and the brightest kids leaving college are all focused on one thing, which is getting you to look over here for an additional millisecond so that that time can be sold when it's not what you want. And that is having direct implications on how we all feel every day, what it's like to be at the dinner table, what it's like when your kid comes home from school, what it's like to wake up in the morning, what it's like to try to sleep through the night. What it feels like to be here is being deeply transformed by the existence of that industry of human predator. And in that context, we need a movement of folks pushing back against what is unacceptable in this relatively new and essentially unregulated suite of activities which are obviously at odds with human flourishing. Do any of the people running those businesses want you to live more fully? No. They want to maximize return on their investments and optimize the pocketbook situations of their investors. Period. Like, that's how capitalism works, okay? And that's why capitalism needs to be regulated, because capitalism doesn't care about people, it cares about return on investment. And that's market-based solutions to complex problems. Lovely, wonderful, no objection. I'm not a Marxist. If you want to have that conversation with me, we can do that. Believe in private property, blah, blah, blah. We can talk about this forever. But like, will that system thresh and mulch humans if you let it? For sure it will. It's done it before. How about like the last big technological revolution we had with like steam engines? Anybody in that class in here? What happened with the Industrial Revolution? They made steam engines, then they had a factory system, and then what happened? They chained humans to those machines and they mulched those humans in order to maximize return on investments in the satanic mills of Lancashire, right? And what happened to resist that? It wasn't that like people working on the satanic mills were like, I really need to regulate the time I'm working at this mill. Like, I should get some kind of app on my hands so that I'm not just constantly at the loom here, you know? No, people had to achieve new forms of solidarity. They needed to come together. They needed to resist. And they needed to affect social action collectively to create new forms of trade unionism and labor activism, new forms of legal protection for workers. And we need that. We're on the cusp of that. That's going to start now. It is starting already. It's happening. And I'm asking you all to kind of come along and join in. I want you all to begin to think of yourselves as attention activists. And what is it to be an attention activist? It's basically to be concerned with resisting this commodification of human attention. It's about insisting that attention is more than this narrow, instrumental, always already commodified thing. It's about insisting that attention is more than that. And it's about joining with others to help, not just thinking that it's you alone, feeling bad about yourself because you went down an internet hole. You know what I mean? That's not what it's about. So attention activism is a catchphrase I give you. I have some little cards for the school that we have created and have been running. I'm very proud that we just had a huge little news episode on Telemundo for the Spanish speakers in the room. They sent like a whole crew to like watch one of our free classes and workshops, and it was like really affecting. And we promote attention activism, which we think of as study, organizing. So maybe you like bonsai trees. Maybe you are into macrame or knitting. Like, you're already an attention activist, because those are, maybe you're like a rock climber. Like, you can't be fracked when you're rock climbing because you'll fall off the mountain. So when you're rock climbing, you're like, this is a form of attention activism. Like, my attention cannot be commodified when I'm trying to find my next handhold. And so we want people to think of themselves as like a new kind of collective in the things they do with themselves and with others that won't let this system get at them. So that's organizing. So we say it's about study of attention and thinking about it, realizing its history, its expansiveness, and its importance. What's attention activism? It's about study. It's about organizing, coalition building. And then the third thing, which is, I will argue, and this is my last word to you today, it's about what we've tried to do here, which is to create sanctuary. To create sanctuary. To create a protected space where we've been able to do something that was distinctive, thinking and talking together, because we turn stuff off for a second. And if we forget how to do that, we are totally screwed. And these universities and colleges, like libraries, like museums, like families, these are key spaces that we need to begin to think of as part of the work of attention activism under the rubric of